Hey, Sandra.
Hi, how are you? So I'm
Okay.
finishing my PhD, and I was wondering which kind of advice would you give to someone that is transitioning out of academia to the industry, to data science specifically. And it was really nice to chat, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I feel like in a lot of ways I did the same thing, but like my PhD was in literature, and then this is so odd. Okay. I don't know
Yeah,
how I
it
got
was so
disconnected.
odd.
Huh?
I was kicked out. I don't know what
Yeah,
happened.
I got kicked out. Oh no. So then,
Mhm.
all right. So you lost. All right. I'll do a little bit of a recap from the last question because the question was about like shifting from academia into industry. So my TLDR on that is that the things you care about in industry are things you don't have to care about in academia. So optimization and simplicity. I think in academia, like I spent way more time like luxuriating in complexity and not having to like optimize any of my pipelines or approaches. And those are like the critical things in like industry. So it really makes you like rethink like a lot of like your practices and finding, I guess, what I call like praxis with like the real world, if that makes sense.
Any other question? Any other people would like to try to jump in? Hopefully, we won't be kicked out this
Yeah, I know.
time.
I'll just say like connect with me on LinkedIn if like there's anything I can follow up as
Okay,
well.
we do have a question in the chat. I'm gonna read it. So, are there business non-technical challenges you are facing ML in your work, specifically in making the goal of your work understood by business people?
Yes, all of that. All of that. Explainability is like key, right? So one of the things that like we actually look for, this isn't like unique to like Shopify, but was also like the case for other organizations I've worked at where we've hired in machine learning capacity in particular, was the ability to actually like refocus the discussion on the business problem, right? Or the problem you're solving for like real people. Like your product like owners or your business stakeholders don't need to be given like a walkthrough of like the algorithmic like complexity of like your solution. They need to understand at a really high level what it does, how it accepts like input from your users, and what the algorithm does to convert that into like an output. And I think like being forced from like a stakeholder perspective to like reframe how we're approaching problems from a technical perspective is so valuable. And then if you're really lucky and you're doing something like reinforcement learning, that already is like super simple to explain because we all have to like teach our pets or animals things, our pets or our children things, and like using like real world examples to like talk through how a particular approach is like working is super effective as well. But like it's that business like acumen piece. It's like the problem you're solving is actually a human one. So like talk about it and show the value of it in human terms.
Okay, so questions are coming into the chat, so I'm moving to the second one. I have a background in process improvement and Six Sigma. Your advice for professional in my field who would like to explore opportunity in machine learning?
I'm not sure how to answer this one. Like, I don't know. Process improvement, Six Sigma, like can probably really effectively like translate into like career and like machine learning with like probably some extra investment and really like understanding how those competencies like transfer to a different like domain space. Like I would probably need more information on like what in those areas was like the particular discipline like focus. Anything like translates into like ability to work in the machine learning field, psychology, business. They're just different skill sets to acquire, I guess.
Yeah, I felt like there are a lot of similarities, especially for data analyst and Six Sigma. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's like any discipline can like translate like effectively into any other discipline, as you like extend like the critical, especially like the critical like thinking skills you develop in other roles, right?
I agree.
Yeah, that's an unsatisfactory answer, I'm sure, but like there is no like disciplinary like prerequisites for machine learning. A lot of it is like additional like skills that like you acquire for that domain, right?
I agree. Okay, let's move with the next question. No one want to come on camera, so I'll read the questions. So, okay, someone is asking to join us. Meanwhile, I'm gonna read the next question. What is the data science work that you are most excited about at Shopify?
That's a really good question. Trying to think about what I can like say that won't be like super specific. So if I look at the work my group is doing like right now, I'll generalize it up a little bit. The set of like teams that I'm working with right now, we have like two components to the data science and like I'll call it like the data engineering work we're doing. One is like building a platform to make data models like available like more widely across like our organization, right? And then the other part of it is also like being able to like effectively utilize like those models for merchant facing like features. And like for me personally, having like that dual perspective on how we're building is super excited, right? Like there's certain sets of like constraints and challenges that you naturally occur when you're like thinking of building something that'll be useful for like a customer or an end user, and having to make that like also accept the use cases of internal like customers is a little bit of an extra like challenge and a different way to like think about like your problem as kind of like a two-sided marketplace that I think is really cool.
Awesome, thank you. So Michelle, do you want to?
I thought I'd throw out a question because I've sort of been playing around with an idea a little bit for building a recommender system for like mothers who are trying to sign their kids up for programs, because it's always one of the things that is the biggest time suck for me, and it's one of those sort of primary parent or female problems that doesn't get addressed, I think, partially because of lack of representation for women in STEM. And so I just wonder if you can recommend any networks or groups that can sort of help me develop an idea that's sort of female focused, because I think one of the challenges is when I bring the ideas forward in other areas, there isn't always like a receptive audience, perhaps, because it's sort of more of a mother's problem, or more often.
Like this is like going to be like probably like slightly like adjacent to like what you want to do, Michelle, but like I would say I've absolutely in the past like found really receptive like audiences for this kind of work at Data for Good like meetups, right? Like like my only like hesitation around like some of these suggestions, because I think meetups are actually like the best like place to like not only like gather like community around yourself for like novel like ideas, but to be able to get good like both technical as well as social feedback on it. Like my hesitation is that I don't know what the impact of like COVID has on a lot of like these like groups, right? Because a lot of meetups I used to attend like just have like frozen. Well, they figure out how to do like virtual well. So I would say like actually doing a look on like meetups that said like Data for Good has just such an incredible like group of people. If like you're an R user at all, there's Our Lady. Okay, so this is perfect. Our Lady I would like go to like first then, because they're incredibly supportive, and I know they do like tons of like mentoring for like individual like projects. Otherwise I probably wouldn't like encourage to like just trawl for like Facebook groups, but I find a lot of great groups out like Twitter is actually a more useful source for me for like kind of finding those organizations as well, with like the caveat that a lot of them froze like with lockdown. But Our Ladies, like definitely.
I'll try Our Ladies because I had posted some things with Data for Good, like to volunteer, but I think it has frozen just because I also think that a lot of the nonprofits that they were helping have been overloaded with their primary objectives that they're not necessarily calling for data assistance at the moment. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you. It's a great question.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
So I'm moving with the next question. So how have you dealt with the mental strain associated with trying to live up to a professional idea originally created to stifle rather than support gender diversity?
I don't know if I'll have like anything super satisfying to say here, because I feel this is like a deeply personal journey. I went through a couple of like phases, if I'm being honest. One of the phases I went through like early was actually just to do an emotional like reset on how I had found myself like responding in very like internalized personal ways to any resistances I had found in our field. That's a lot of words. I basically like just rerouted my head. It wasn't what I wanted to focus my energy on. It wasn't important, and it was like limiting my ability personally to like continue to grow. It made me like doubt like learning paths I was taking, like career choices I was making. So I just did an internal reset. So I said it's deeply personal. Like everyone's journey for how they get around these obstacles will be very, very different. So emotional reset for me. Also ensuring that I made really deliberate choices in the organizations I worked at. So I call a couple of them out like specifically because like they have afforded me like environments that were incredibly like expansive and really like helped me like grow and didn't put up any like barriers to my career path and created like great environments for that. So definitely like Wattpad, where I spent a lot of time, was an incredible like growth accelerator there. PagerDuty was fantastic. One of like probably one of like the best like environments I had to really like feel fully like empowered across like both like engineering and data science fields. And then like my move to Shopify was really deliberate and was for like those same circumstances. Like how they've built like their engineering and data like organizations is empowering. And I went also specifically because it was one of my like bucket list items to work with Solmaz, who's the VP of data science and engineering at Shopify, before I retired, because she's incredible. I know it probably wasn't exactly what the person was asking, but like it's so custom.
No, I feel like you have provided such a great answer. It's really personal how people affront this situation, but your answer was really good. So I'm gonna move to another question that is from myself, saying that. So what book would you recommend to women that are trying to be successful in AI tech, and why?
For women.
Yeah.
So I don't know that if I have any book suggestions for women like specifically. I do have like a book suggestion for everyone, and I'm sure everyone here is like probably already like read this because you can access it for free online, but that's deep learning, right? So Ian Goodfellow, Joshua Bengio, Aaron Corville, it's accessible. It has great like exercises. It upskills people like really, really quickly. I don't actually know, like to the specific question being asked, if I've encountered any book that was like helpful to me from like a gendered perspective. but like deep learning is like the gold standard for me for how you like introduce hard topics to people who have varying degrees of like expertise. I found it super accessible. And like, well, actually, when I was like at Wattpad, we bought it for our team and we kind of worked through it together. The pain of it bonded us, right? It made us better, but you know, just kidding. It's a joke.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll check this book out. Okay, let's continue with the question in chat. How does your team balance the time to spend on the actual data science work and on researching new algorithm tools, platforms?
Yeah, I mean, you can do this in like a lot of like ways. For me, it's like super important for like technical teams to have technical roadmaps that sit alongside and inform the product roadmaps that you're like building against, right? So I don't look at like any of the engineers or data scientists that I've ever had like the good fortune to work with as just there to execute. We're actually there to contribute like strategically and to like the innovation like portfolios of our organizations, right? So our priorities are always like product like development if you're with a product development team, but in their technical roadmaps you have to have some proportion of like people's like time like reserved for innovation or research work, right? It makes all of us better at our jobs. Like that'll look different depending on your organization. Some orgs you can like be able to fit in like 10% work. Sometimes it's 20% work for folks that don't want to do like percentage proportions of their roadmaps. One thing that a lot of teams at Shopify do, which is really, really cool, are like mini sprints, right? So if you have a really good like research idea or you want to do an innovation project, you like pitch it to like your group's like leadership. And like I've not seen any of them like unafforded, and you can put a small kind of like tiger team together and you take a mini sprint 2 weeks, right, to like prototype out an idea, invest in like research. But I would say also for most like engineering and data science teams, like you do have the concept of technical spikes. It's like you don't just like jump into like solutioning or development in any case, right? Technical spikes are like the kind of time boxed like piece that like you take to like adequately like research a potential solution. So there's a lot of different like flavors for how you can do that, but I've never seen like that time not afforded somewhere. Excuse me. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so let's pick up another question. So what characteristics do you think it's fundamental for a woman who to become a successful leader in tech?
Where is that so I can look at it? Is it on the chat?
Yeah, no, it's in the list from the previous.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. What characteristic do you think it's fundamental for a woman to become a successful leader in tech?
Yeah, don't ever lose your voice. And like I'll say right here, this is like controversial because I know people like love it, but I hated the concept of like lean in because it feels like weird and it feels like by default like you're in a position of exclusion, and that like you're really kind of passively just kind of sitting forward like to like project yourself. But I do think having a strong like point of view, not being afraid to exercise like your voice, and banishing that imposter syndrome is key. Like I think that this is not like exclusive to like women either. Like it kind of bothers me that we only talk about imposter syndrome often in relation to like women in tech. Everybody has imposter syndrome, right? It's just that like people are like coached, like maybe men are coached like earlier to like use like their voices more strongly to push themselves past that. But like having your voice like heard, finding a good sponsor within your organization to amplify your voice is also super helpful. So like especially in orgs like where you have like good allies like in leadership positions, or like women or other folks from marginalized populations in leadership positions can sponsor you and amplify your voice. Is key. It's key. If I had no voice, I would not be in a leadership position like 100%.
Thank you so much. I really feel like this answer also touched my position because I'm a senior in the field, but I'm the only female of the team. So sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you don't know if people is listening to you because they don't want to exclude you, or so it's really important. And I never thought about finding like somebody that like a sponsor inside. This is really a good suggestion. Thank you so much. So let's take another question from the chat. Okay, I see a lot of technical questions. Let's see if there is something more related to. Okay, let's take one technical question, and then maybe we go back to one of the one in the list. So going in order, what have you found to be good practice for getting from research to production? Agile for dev is well researched, established, but what about for ML data science?
This is such a good question. And I am hugely passionate about agile data science. There's some like foundation like work in this area, but like you all might find it fairly unsatisfying because it spends a lot of time like talking about stack versus like practice. And a lot of this is just going to be like a significant amount of like experimentation and iteration with your teams. Right. So one thing that I found to be like really, really effective for introducing agile data science like practices to data science teams and to engineering teams is to have a good organizational structure that affords like those shared learnings. And I'll call it loosely like dual track. So for some of you, if you're in like prod dev orgs, you might already be using dual track like agile on your teams. And that essentially like creates parallel tracks so that while a delivery team is like building, like UX typically will be having a stream underneath it that's maybe 2 cycles like ahead, and that's their research stream. So in orgs that I belong to, I actually like introduce them if they haven't heard of dual track to dual track, and this usually helps UX as well as data, because you need that kind of like forward looking like perspective. Like for sure, like for machine learning or data science, you're not like developing your solution and researching and like validating and experimenting at the same time as you're expecting like your engineering like colleagues to be implementing it. Like you need like a couple of cycles ahead at minimum. So something like dual track, like Agile is super supportive of that. Gets like the data work ahead of time, like validated before you have to collaborate on implementation decisions. There's lots of stuff like online, as I said, like it'll be like feel a bit tricky to do with like your teams, but I found it works best on teams where data is like properly like integrated or embedded into like product like development and in like data production like roles versus like capacities that like kind of like sit in a silo on like a team and are just given ad hoc like requests. But a lot of the practices you would use in software development for like Agile can absolutely like apply to data science. You just need to be really comfortable like customizing, stretching, and adapting those where you need to, right? Ensuring your cycles make sense. Like lean program's kind of good for that because it's 6-week cycles. So I suggest people look into that. And at Shopify, like most of our teams do, like engineering teams do 6-week cycles as well. So it becomes a lot easier for me to think about how we like manage like machine learning or data science workflows within like that longer cycle period. It's fun. And like I found data science teams to be super excited about playing around with some of these concepts, even though like everyone hates, except me, hates Jira. I love Jira for data science work. You can make it work. Custom workflows.
Okay, thank you so much. This was a good answer. I decided that it doesn't like that much Jira.
I know, but you can make a custom like workflow and you can make like research like issues. I don't know. I'm very like organization minded, so I like it. It's unpopular opinion, I know.
Okay, so taking another question from the list of women in data. So what is one thing you wish you knew at the start of your career?
Yeah, I think like I touched on it a little bit in the primary session, but it's honestly like feeling really comfortable failing. Like, but I actually like really appreciate like starting my career in startups because like lean startup philosophy and failure is considered huge learning wins, right? And like a lot of like especially really small startups manage it in terms of like a percentage of like wins. So if you try, it's like this like 10% rule or like right, so if you do 10 things and like one of those things is like successful, that is like a huge value back to like your organization. And I think like coming up or at least being introduced to like concepts of like failure as powerful was incredibly important for like the mindset that I adopted and matured as I grew through my career. As I said, like initially, like I think my very first job, like I was just so terrified of being wrong that I would be working like 14-hour days, like to check all of the things that I did and make sure that I completed everything 100% to like someone else's expectations. And I'm glad I got into an environment early enough on where I learned like actually how wrong that was, right? So failure, that if you learn from it, is amazing accelerator. And taking risks, never be afraid to like take risks.
Thank you, really a good suggestion. I feel so connected to this answer. I feel like you're talking with me, so I'm getting sorry if I smile too much. Okay, so I'm taking one technical question from chat. So if you were the first data scientist hired and now you were urgently responsible for the direction of your team growth, based on your experience, what would be the best system process you would recommend putting in place?
So I have been here. It's super, super hard. And it depends on like the nature of like your organization as well. So that's just like the caveat. Honestly, like the thing that like I wish I had known the first time I had to start a data capacity from scratch within an organization is how important two things are. One is like your organizational strategy for it, how you're going to structure yourselves in relationship to the rest of your organization. And the second piece is how you're going to balance like the actual work that you take on for those teams. So I'll be a little more specific there for people to think about it, because again, it's definitely going to change depending on your unique circumstances. But when you're thinking about like organizational structure, there's like 6 like key ways like you can approach it. I'll talk about like a few of like the initial ones that seem most intuitive when you're building something from scratch. One is like you have what's called a center of excellence, and that's like you just centralize it. And you're like not worrying about what like different like team capabilities are going to look like at that point. If you need like applied research or if you need like an analytics like base, you're just like everyone is going to be together. We have nobody. So as we build this, we're all going to learn from each other. We're going to be central in the organization, and like requests are going to come into us. And maybe we'll also do some like push out, but we're not going to be expecting to get lots of buyers there because people are still figuring out who we are, what we can do for them. And that's like a really quick way to like kick off like a new initiative. It very quickly becomes like problematic though for all of the ways that makes it good at the beginning. And that's like basically get your culture set first within like, let's just call it like say your data team. Becomes really hard to start like clarifying to the people on your team though how they're bringing value to an organization when they have such different like kinds of like requests coming in without like scoping that well in advance. So the piece that like I think I've come to like land on is a bit of like a hybrid like model, and that's like where it makes sense, deep embed people within like existing product development or business capabilities, having them work in a healthy like collaborative like partnership with the people who can give them like the highest like value or ROI back on like their outputs, right? And when I say a hybrid model, is because I think it's also like important to like have folks like working like in a looser relationship with like the business that can really, especially for like new capacities, like data often is in organizations, just to like kind of like start exploring some of those blue sky pieces that can really like excite an organization like around. Like those kinds of like research capabilities, I typically would recommend keeping really small. You want your folks to be proving value back to the organization quickly, and embedding is like the best way to do that. And also like being really clear with like your folks that like their time will probably be split between like having to answer like questions like back to like products. So they're going to have to take on like a proportion of analytics work as well as like product development work. So you become a bit of a full stack person. But that to me is like the highest value you can bring back.
Thank you. So we just got a very interesting question on the chat. So I'm going to read you. So it's the last one. What is your secrets in filling the gaps between your background and the challenging requirements of a data scientist leader role in such a short time? As a woman, that characteristic we could leverage in achieving the goal in career?
Yeah, like there are two pieces that I did. And again, this is going to be completely like different, like for different people, how they approach it, because different people learn differently. I am a very structured like learning. So I went back to school and got a technical like degree. And I spent all of my free time building things and practicing. So that was what was right for me because I learned by doing. And I also work better in structured environments. So I wanted to take classes, and I also wanted to like free my like time up to be able to do like projects like at home. Like I basically, that was my life for like several like years after I left humanities. And then that continued from like my practice when I actually got my first job in technology. Like I just never stopped learning. When I moved to like Toronto from BC and got my first like, I'll call it like real job in like tech, I probably for the first like 3 or 4 years of my career, I was continuously taking night classes at Ryerson. Like they have so many great like engineering courses like actually available like at night school for continuing ed, and they were the same curriculum that folks would take in like the full-time programs, and I just took them all the time and kept like learning until I felt like really comfortable that I could do this like in practice with people who had been like trained from like a degree perspective to do it. So there was a lot of that. But I think like actually the advantage of starting out in like the humanities was quite large. It didn't like take me, it wasn't a stretch for me to have like product first thinking about the work I was doing, or like what some orgs call like business acumen. Like in humanities, like you're overtrained, some might say, in like critical like thinking, right? And I have found just in my career in hiring data scientists or engineers, like for engineering groups, is that sometimes the hardest like gap to like cross for engineers is product first thinking, right? Because like for a lot of like people coming out of like engineering programs, you're technology first thinking, right? So there's like hard technology problems to like solve. So the technology solution often comes like sometimes at the expense of like the problem you're trying to solve for real humans. That your work is actually going to be like used by. So I actually think I had a little bit of an advantage there. Like the technical stuff like felt easy for me to like learn, and I loved learning it. I was super passionate about it. I do think the harder part is like the problem space understanding and really like being able to like grok like the product thinking pieces.
Thank you. So I'll move to, I think we have only one question left in the chat. So I'll ask one from the list and one from the chat. And then if there is no other question, we are gonna close this session. Okay, so still talking about women that are trying to get their career up in tech. So do you have any advice on how you can differentiate yourself?
That's a really good question. differentiate, like, I don't know if I think of it like specifically as like a differentiating like aspect, but I'll pull from like one of the prior questions that I answered around like voice, right? I don't know if there's something specific about like personal branding I would suggest to people, although like I think there's tons of folks in our community, especially like women in our community who are like really, really good at this, like developing like a strong like issue-based like perspective that they communicate like broadly via like blog posts or like community presence. Uh, if that's like comfortable for folks, I think that that's probably like the strongest like route to like building like your sense of like self and your position within the community, and also be able to leverage that within like your organizations. Like I think through like a large part of like my career, I was just really active in like meetups and in like the local like community. Any organization I worked at, like I was hosting like meetups and bringing people into like our organization to get to find out more about the places that I worked at, and just like networking, because like I love people and I love meeting people and I love learning from like other people. So I don't think that that's necessarily a differentiator, but it was a way of like really like becoming close to like the communities that I was passionate about, and using like that particular like route, not only to get better at my craft for myself, but to like broaden like our community spaces. There's some good people I can like refer folks to offline, like connect with me on LinkedIn. Like there's like folks I can like direct you to who I think are really like good examples of doing this like effectively and professionally, not just from presence at like meetups and events, but also having like their own personal like stories around their technical like paths that they like share on like via LinkedIn or Medium, right? So those are good like options, but like find the unique way for yourself to like have your voice heard. It could be a podcast. Do a podcast. We're all in lockdown. Do a podcast.
Good suggestion. I don't think it will work for me. I'm too shy to do a podcast, but if you feel like do it, so you can differentiate yourself.
I'd listen to it.
Okay, so I think we got another question, but there was one left. So how do you test the business ideas before you go off and develop ML models? Or do you iterate the ML model to keep validating that the business outcome is achievable?
Yeah, you should do both. So if you're fortunate like enough to have experimentation programs in like your organization, make full use of them. Like I think like for data science like organizations I've been like responsible to, like sometimes like that's not like always possible and you have to put something in production. So I'll talk about that one first because it's the easiest one. You have to have like rigor and strong practice around like offline testing. And I know like everything that you find out in offline testing will be the opposite in the real world, but it's still like a piece of like rigor that I like my teams to like engage in. Also because it's super useful to see like how like your assumptions about how like an algorithm, for example, like I'm just going to say recommendation algorithm because that's probably like the clearest example of something that will look a certain way from a mathematical perspective, like an offline test. And then when you put it in front of people, it completely breaks. So how you like solve for that is you have like your offline test results. When you put it into production, ensure that like your product like development team has like properly like instrumented like your feature, so that you're able to actually collect data on like how people are using the feature that exploits like your algorithm, and then really, really like retrospect on how it differs from what your assumptions and expectations were. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be in an organization that supports like A/B testing, either through internal platforms or like third-party like software, like test that first, right? Usually like if that exists within an organization, they have a healthy culture around that. So being able to like deliver those like pretty cheaply in terms of like cost to your dev teams and yourself should be like doable. It's always fascinating to me how like humans like break all assumptions. So super important to test and iterate. like constantly like improving on like the algorithms that people are engaging is important, because you'll notice like ML ops isn't really like a popular thing right now, but I'm pretty passionate about this too, because one of the things I like teams to like track is how the underlying like distribution of like your user populations change over time, because often you'll be able to strongly correlate that with what's breaking your algorithm, right? If something's been performing really well in production for like a year, and something like COVID happens and your user base completely like changes and stuff starts breaking or engagement breaking, like you'll see that like shift in like your user population, right? So that's a bit of a tripwire you can use. So instrument all of the things, track all of the things, create observability around the features that your algorithms are functioning through.
Yeah, that's really a good answer. So especially for testing purpose, I totally agree. Okay, so we have one last question. So I'll try, it's longer, but I'll try to kind of shorten up a little bit. A lot of the time, a technical degree is a first filter for data science and ML jobs, especially for research. What signal can one generate to replace the lack of formal advanced degrees?
Yeah. So like I will say, like at Shopify, we don't care at all about like what your like background is. One thing that I look at a lot, and I encourage people to do on their resumes or when they're submitting their CVs, and that I don't think enough people do is like share your GitHub, like do projects, first of all, right? Especially like I think that's especially important for people who feel like they may not be like as credentialized as they think the industry is like looking for. Like really what will make you successful, like in the end, yes, the technical like skills are like important, but creativity, curiosity, and proactivity around how you engage problems is really like the differentiator for success. I have to say. I have definitely worked with people with like extraordinary technical skills who were not successful like in industry because they weren't proactively curious, right? So like the things that can serve you well in academia may not be the things that serve you like most effectively in industry. I totally got off topic because I feel strongly about that. Going back to my original thread, I spent a lot of time going through people's GitHub projects, right? My recommendation would be for those GitHub projects to not be the projects that you get to that introduction to machine learning on Coursera, though. Like everyone's seen like the Twitter, like the tweet classification, like really extend like your skills and take what you learn through like the routes that you've taken to like build your skill set and take on new projects and challenges, put them on GitHub. Those are some things that I look for. I don't find like resumes to be super indicative of like success. Like you're going to be going through the same like interview like sessions and loops that anyone from any background is going to be doing. So you have lots of opportunity to be able to like prove your ability to like your interviewers. But yeah, the GitHub projects are pretty key.
So I have a follow-up question on this topic because I personally struggling to find time to do my personal project. So when I do maybe something for myself, I ended up using working data because it's where I have like this huge amount of data. I already know the data. Maybe I've already started to clean up some of those. So this is where, and of course, this project then cannot be shared on GitHub. So I don't know what other suggestion can somebody add, maybe some project and GitHub to show that. I don't think I'm the only one that does that, right?
No, it's like, no, you for sure aren't. Well, what I would say is that if you're doing like those projects that are like more directly like connected back to work, then you probably like have like experience that's showing on your CV that you're working in that field, right? Mm-hmm. Like where GitHub can be like, or public GitHub can be like, I think probably like more like valuable for folks coming in from work experience that is not in the field, or academic backgrounds that are outside of the field. I don't think many people like really look at like the academic credentialization anymore. Like, I would be surprised. To me, it's like I don't glance at it at all. I'm looking at work experience or GitHub projects.
Okay, I see another question coming, but thank you so much. So that's I'll try to kind of do the same, also because especially
or there's passion projects, right? Like there's like things that like you might care about around like climate change or like COVID tracking, where there's public like data sets, and so it feels like more motivating to have to do that work at home. I don't know. It's a hard one.
Okay, it confused me that I hear a lot of people saying that the resumes won't be processed by humans, but by algorithm in applicant tracking system. So in that case, how can having a well-polished, good GitHub account with a good open source contribution, high quality project, etc. helps?
Well, I don't know how to respond to that, because like at Shopify and every organization I've worked at, we're not using algorithms to process our resumes. Like humans are looking at them at every stage through our pipeline, right?
Okay, last question, then I think we are a little bit over, so I don't want to keep you here the entire night. Okay, what big data platform Shopify using right now?
Oh yeah, I answered in line. GCP. I mean, like,
I didn't
GCP is like the primary. Like, yeah, we're invested.
Okay, Michelle has another question. Are Kaggle camps viable for sharing on GitHub as strong projects?
I can only speak for myself. Like, I hate Kaggle competitions. I think they optimize for the wrong things. Don't listen to me. You know, like if you have passion, like honestly, don't listen to me. If you have like a passion for like Kaggle competitions, and like you've been able to really like stretch the way that like you approach like those problems, absolutely like put them on like GitHub, celebrate them, and people will look at them. Like, I don't know. I think that like there's a moment like in like how you're like broadening and stretching like yourself like technically, where like the Kaggle competitions, it's like doing the like memorizing the leak code stuff for your interviews, right? Like to me, it just kind of it smells of that. It's just that like there are lots of problems in this world that you're going to be uniquely positioned to have a perspective on and like solve. And a lot of open public like data sets, I encourage people to like express like their creativity through finding like novel problem domains, and really showcasing like that. Like that's only speaking for me. I am definitely like probably in the minority of feeling that way though. Like probably like this is fine for every job you'll be applying to. I just like I'm snotty about that. I think Kaggle's like, yeah, optimizes for the wrong things. I'll put it in chat so everyone knows. Ignore me.
Okay, so I think we are done with the questions. So also we are 10 minutes late. But thank you so much for staying here, for answering all the questions. It was such a great pleasure for me to moderate this session. It's my first time. I'm really shy. I hate doing this stuff, but
you were amazing.
Yeah, this is why I'm doing it. If I want to get better at it, I have to do it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us and for listening to our conversation and for posting your question. So
yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nadia. You were fantastic.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.